Well, it's extra credit time again. In order to get full credit, I want you to write down the problem and then the solution. So with this one, combine like terms, the first thing you need to do is distribute or multiply through by this -7 for these two terms right here. And then multiply by 8 or distribute this 8 with these two terms over here. So this 5 is going to have to wait until later. In here, -7 times 6 is -42, so there's -42x. And then the -7 times -4 is +28. Next up, over here we've got an 8 times 3 will be +24x. And then the 8 times -4 is -32. Now combine the like terms. So I'm going to do the x's first of all. So with -42 and 24, you need to actually subtract those two numbers since they're the opposite sign, and that's going to be -18. So there's -18x. And then as far as the constants, there's -32 and +28. So if you subtract those two, it's going to be a 4, but because this was negative, it's actually going to be a -4. Then combine -4 with 5, and it's going to leave a +1. On to number 2. So this computer costs $1,000. It's going to be 15% off, and then after that you have to pay 8% sales tax. So I'm going to do this in 2 steps. First of all, take 15% off. Well, 15% means multiply with the decimal 0.15 times 1,000. And multiplying by 1,000 really just means take this decimal and move it to the right by 3 places. So if I move it 1, 2, and then one more place, it's going to be 1, 5 with a single 0 at the end. Or in other words, it's going to be $150 off. Since they're taking that off the price, you then have to take $1,000 and subtract 150. So this is going to be 0 minus 0. Then I need to borrow, so this is going to be borrow and borrow. This is going to be 10 minus 5 is 5, and 9 minus 1 is 8. So that means after the sale, the price is $850. Now for the next part, pay 8% tax. So 8% is the decimal 0.08, and then, excuse me, my pen just broke. This math is too hard for my pen. I just broke my pen. Okay, here we go. And then multiply with 850. So for this, it's going to be, I'll work over here on this side, 850 times 0.08. So this would be 0. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 8 is 64. And 64 with 4 more is 68. And then the rest of it would be 0 times something, so that's not really going to add anything to the problem. Now this says move the decimal place over by 2. So move the decimal place over by 2, and it belongs right here. So in other words, the tax, I'm being challenged by the pens this morning. This one doesn't want to work either. The tax is $68. So finally we have to add that onto the price. So it was $850, and now add $68 in tax. So this will be an 8. This 5 and 6 is an 11. And then 8 with one more is 9. So the final price after the sale and after the tax is $918. Next, a conversion problem. So with this one, we need to use the fact that 1 mile is 5,280 feet. And then with this one, I could use the idea of multiplying by a fraction, or I could just take this, and if I need to change it to 26.2 miles, that means I need to multiply this side by 26.2. So multiply this side by 26.2, but then I'll have to multiply this side by 26.2. And so on this side, it's going to say 26.2 miles. And then on this side, it would be whatever 5280 times 26.2, and then that will be in feet. So then we just need to multiply these. So at this point in the semester, with longer multiplication problems like that, we can use the calculator. So 5,280 times 26.2, that's a lot of feet. So this is actually the length of a marathon. So getting a huge answer makes sense. So it'd be 1, 3, 8, 3, 3, 6. So 138,336 feet in a mile. And then something similar, except take our system. In the United States, we use miles. Most of the rest of the world uses kilometers. So for example, when we drive 60 miles an hour, how much is that in kilometers per hour? So this is per hour and this is per hour. So this part is going to stay the same, per hour and per hour. What I really need to do is change miles to kilometers. So 60 miles, and then I have to change that to kilometers. And then the per hour part is going to stay the same. So with this one, I can just take this and multiply by 60, and then that's going to be 60 miles, but I'll have to multiply this side by 60 as well. So if you multiply this side by 60 and this side by 60, I really need to know what is 1.6 times 60. And you could line these up as 60 times 1.6 or 1.6 times 60, you'll get the same thing. So in here, multiply 0 times this is just going to be 0. And then the next one's going to be 0, so that's not really going to add anything to the problem. I could just go on to the next part, which is 6 times 6 is 36. And then 6 times 1 would be 6, with 3 more is 9. And then this part is saying move the decimal over by 1. So the decimal was right here, move it over by 1, and it would go right there. So the answer would be 96 kilometers per hour. So when we're driving 60 miles an hour, then in kilometers it would be 96 kilometers per hour. So this guy is earning $16.50 per hour, but then he gets a 10% raise. So the first thing we need to do is change the 10% to a decimal, so that's going to be 0.10, and then multiply that by $16.50. Well, you could do long multiplication just like I did on the last problem, but this one is really saying just multiply by a 0.1. Well, multiplying by 1 would give us the same numbers, 1, 6, 5, 0. And for this 1, the decimal place has been moved over by 1 because the 0 doesn't really matter. I can, in place of this, I could have used 0.1. It means the same thing. So this one is saying the decimal got moved over by 1. With this one, the decimal got moved over by 2. So in total, the decimal got moved over by 3. So 1, 2, 3 places. So that means that the person's raise is $1.65. Now, how much are they going to be making? So if they were making $16.50 an hour plus a raise of $1.65 an hour, add those together, and that will be it. So add these as a 5. The 5 and 6 makes 11. This would be 6 with 1 is 7, 1 more is 8. And so the new hourly wage is $18.50. 15 cents, excuse me. Then finding the area of a triangle. Well, the formula for area of a triangle is that it's 1/2 times the base times the height. So the base, that would be along the bottom. That's this side right here. So that's 3. So this is going to be the number 3. The height, though, would be going straight up. So that would be this side right here. And right now, this side is missing. So I'm going to have to do some other math from a couple chapters ago to find out what this side is. Right now, I'll just call it x. And then I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem, which says this side squared plus this side squared equals this side squared. Or in other words, x squared plus 3 squared is equal to 5 squared. Or if I simplify that, x squared plus 9 is equal to 25. And then what I could do is subtract 9 from both sides. And it's going to say x squared is equal to 25 minus 9 is 16. So in other words, what number do you square and you get a 16? That would be the number 4. So this side is 4. So now I can go back to the area formula. 1/2. The base is this number 3. And the height is this number that we just found out, 4. So that means it's half of 3 times 4. Or it's half of 12. And half of 12 is 6. And with area, it's supposed to be in inches squared, feet squared, meters squared. With this one, it doesn't say what the units are. So then what you do is just say it's in whatever the units are, squared. Here's another one about geometry. This time it's a circle. So with a circle, the diameter means you look at the circle. Diameter means go right across the middle. All the way across is the diameter. Well, the formula for circumference of a circle is 2 pi times the radius. And I know that for pi, I can use 3.14. The radius has to be from the center out to the edge. So if all the way across is 8, that means that the radius is half of that. So radius is always equal to half of the diameter. In the end, I'll put that the answer is in meters. For now, I'm just going to use the number 4. So circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius, which is 4. In order to multiply these numbers, I'm going to put the 2 and the 4 together. That makes 8. So it's really 8 times pi. And this one I could just multiply out myself. 3.14 times an 8. So 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 1 is 8. 9, 10, 11. And then this would be 24. With one more is 25. Then move the decimal over by 2. So move the decimal over by 2. The decimal goes right here. So the circumference, or in other words, the distance around the outside of the circle, if a person was to walk around the outside of the circle, would be 25.12. And then finally the units. The units were in meters, so the answer is in meters. And then for number 5, this one at first seems very straightforward, but I want to show you a couple ways to do it. 5 is what percent of 25? So one way to do it is 5 out of a total of 25 equals what percent? So one way to do it is, that's basically saying divide. So we need to take 25 and divide it into 5. And at first it's going to give us a decimal answer, and then at the end we'll change that decimal into a percent. So to complete this problem, of course, 5 will not divide into 5. 25 will not divide into 5 just itself, so we put a decimal, and then put a 0 as a placeholder. 25 will divide into 50 exactly 2 times. And the remainder is 0, so the answer would be 0.2. Okay, but then that has to be changed to a percent. For percent, since the word cent actually means 100, and 100 means there's 2 decimal places, then move this over by 2 decimal places, and the decimal would go right there when you change it to a percent. So then that means the answer would be 20%. But here's the other way I wanted to show you. 5 over 25. If you want to make this a percent, again the word percent literally means per 100, so make it into per 100. So how can I change this to be a denominator of 100? Well, in order to change this 25 into 100, I need to multiply by 4. But if you multiply the bottom of a fraction by a number, you have to multiply the top by the same number. So then the bottom is going to be 25 times 4 is 100. The top would be 4 times 5 is 20. And then this is literally saying 20 per 100, or in other words, 20%. Another one about money. Suppose this iPhone costs $600. As I mentioned before, even if you get a good deal on an iPhone, the retail cost is $600, so you have to pay tax on that full price. So tax in Monterey is usually 8.625 or 8.7. Let's just say that it's 9%. So find the total cost. So one is 9% is going to be 0.09. Multiply that with 600. And you could go ahead and multiply this out as 600 times 0.09 and multiply it this way. Or you could just say, well, what's 9 times 6? 9 times 6 is 54. Then this would have 2 zeros, so you'd have to put 2 zeros on the end. And finally, this has the decimal that's been moved over by 2, so this has to have the decimal moved over by 2. So in other words, the tax is going to be $54. But the question I want to know is, what's the total cost? So that means that the total cost is the original $600 plus $54 in tax. So when you add these, it's a grand total of $654. So if you had to pay full price for an iPhone with tax, we're looking at about $654. And then here's sort of a review problem. It has mixed numbers and decimals and a regular fraction. So the choice is you could use mixed numbers everywhere, fractions everywhere, or decimals everywhere. Which should we use? Well, this one, I could easily make that into an improper fraction. It would be multiply here, so it's 4, and then add 1, it's 5/4. This means 1 1/10. I think I'm going to use fractions. So this one would be 1 1/10 minus 1 1/4. And in here, I'm going to change this to an improper fraction and change this to an improper fraction. So it's going to be the 2/5 is still just waiting for us to finish what's inside the parentheses. This would be 10 plus 1, so this is 11/10. This one would be multiply as 4, add 1, it's 5/4. Now in order to add or subtract fractions, these denominators need to be the same. And it's best to use the smallest number that they can be changed into. With a 10 and a 4, one way to do it is you could look at the multiples of 10 and then just keep going as far as you want to. Look at the multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, and as soon as you get two numbers that are the same, that's the common denominator. So this can be changed into 20 if I multiply by 2. So multiply by 2 on the bottom and the top. This one can be changed into 20 if I multiply by 5. So multiply by 5 on the bottom and the top. And then inside the parentheses, it's going to look like this one would be 22/20. This one would be 25/20. Then they have a common denominator, so that means that the answer is going to be 20ths, and it's going to be 22 of them minus 25 of them. So that's -3. And then we still need to multiply. So I could go ahead and just multiply on the top, multiply on the bottom, and then reduce it. Or I could reduce. For example, a 2 will divide into 20 10 times. So 2 will divide into 20 10 times. Then, will the 3 divide into 5? No. Will the 3 divide into 10? No, not evenly. So that means it can't be reduced anymore. So that means that on the top, all that's left is -3. On the bottom, there's 50. And then it can't be reduced anymore, and it's done.